Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. Today's video is going to be absolutely bonkers. Now, the data is in, and the question is why has the housing market not crashed yet? Or really, the better question is why has the housing market skipped negative equity growth? Now, the thing is, guys, is I'm not just using wordplay here. And I say that because as you guys can see here, something similar happened in 2006. In 2006, we had negative equity decline followed by 6 months of equity recovery, similar to what's going on right now. Let's not forget, from 2009 to 2011, there was seasonal periods of price increase. As you can see here by the red arrows, home prices actually went up during 2009 to 2011 during the seasonal times of home buying. Regardless of those seasonal increases, the overall trend was a downward trajectory, similar to what I believe is going on right now. Once we were out of the recession of 2009, it took roughly 3 years for home values to even rebound. So the way I've broken down this video is basically making 3 different sections. Now, the first section, we're going to go over a Bloomberg article that's going to really dig into the fact that they believe that 30-year fixed rate mortgages are the reason why the housing market hasn't crashed. And they even go as far as to say that 30-year fixed rate mortgages need to be outlawed. Now, the second thing we're going to go in, now the second section of this video, I'm going to tell you why I believe the housing market has paused or skipped the negative price decline, and I'll go over about 5 different things. Now, the last segment of this video, I'm actually going to go into the psychology of fear of missing out and really the mental and physical harm that the fear of missing out actually causes. And if you guys can, for putting this video together, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, shoot me a comment below, hit notifications, but either way, you guys, I hope you enjoy. Unlike most realtors, Bloomberg actually has some pretty good points about why the housing market hasn't crashed. And you guys, I'm awfully tired of hearing realtors say, just buy real estate, home values only go up, you can just refinance later, don't get trapped renting. I'm so tired of hearing that. And most of the realtors on YouTube are lead generating platforms and nothing more. Bloomberg does have a good angle about interest rates, and what they're going to do in this article is really compare what's going on in the United States compared to the rest of the world, who is definitely on the struggle bus, and their housing markets are absolutely crashing right now. The name of the article is "The 30-Year Mortgage is Saving the U.S. Economy," or is it? And right out the gates, they come with the question, why is the U.S. housing market not crashing? Interest rates are up, which means more expensive mortgages, which should push down demand. House prices are already falling in other countries by nearly 9% in Canada and 16% in New Zealand. A map from UBS shows that worldwide, many urban housing markets are bubble territory. Now, the next paragraph is pretty bold, but in the US, prices have barely budged. The explanation is straightforward, if not exactly simple. The 30-year mortgage. It is a financial product that should not exist. Again, in their words, a 30-year mortgage is a product that should not exist. And it may well be the only thing keeping the US housing market from collapsing right now. This is very intriguing because they're not saying low interest rates. They're saying 30-year fixed rate mortgages. Intriguing. The risk of a housing crash is not only that people could lose their homes and much of their wealth as they did in 2008, it's that it could cause a deep recession. As the Great Recession showed, a recession brought on by the fall in house prices can be especially severe since housing tends to be the largest component of household wealth. New Zealand is already in recession, and there are concerns that that housing market will cause more economic turmoil in the UK. And really, it is no question that US home prices have already fallen. But have they fallen enough for us to consider it a crash in prices? Not quite yet. Very intriguing data right here. Prices are falling almost everywhere, but among wealthy countries, America's decline has been more gentle. And that's because of the rebound this year. Dead cat bounce, call it whatever you want. Very interesting to see that New Zealand is down 16.3%, Denmark down 14, Korea 12, Sweden 11. The entire world is in pretty bad shape. Now, according to this, the United States is only down 0.5%. Now, I wouldn't consider a loss of value of 0.5% a housing market crash, but what they're trying to say here is all of these other countries do not have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Most of the homeowners here have actually adjustable rate mortgages, so their interest rates adjust essentially with inflation. Pretty wild to think about, actually. Even as prices for other things are going up, house prices aren't, at least in developed countries. This is because house prices are more sensitive to interest rates. A decade of low rates spurred by the US Federal Reserve's policy and quantitative easing, in which the Fed bought up lots of MBSs or mortgage-backed securities, and then accelerated by the pandemic, brought mortgage rates to a historic low in 2020 and 2021. Many Americans bought new homes or refinanced in the last several years. Finally, there are housing shortages in desirable areas and more foreign and investment buyers, all of which have driven up prices in the US since the last housing bust. And y'all, this goes on. Nowhere in the world is the 30-year fixed rate mortgage as popular as it is in the US, and for good reason. Fannie Mae, created in 1938, and Freddie Mac in 1970, made the 30-year fixed rate mortgage popular in the US because they would buy mortgages from banks, offloading both their rate and default risk. In absence of government intervention, no sane banker would lend a single household so much money for 30 years at a fixed rate. Interesting conclusion of this article, all of which raises another question. If the 30-year fixed rate mortgage can save the US economy from housing crash and allow more homeowners to stay in their home, aren't all Americans better off? In the short term, the answer may be yes, but in the long term, the US housing market will be much less fluid because people are tied to their mortgages. It will be harder for people to move for a better job or to be closer to their families, and there will be less inventory and higher prices for aspiring buyers. Now, I find that article extremely intriguing, and basically what they're talking about is the lock-in effect. Basically, over 95% of American households right now have a mortgage interest rate under 6%. The last time I looked at mortgage interest rates, as of today, they were over 7%. So a tremendous amount of Americans right now are essentially locked into their houses. But as time goes on, many of those people will be forced to sell because the number one reason people move is job relocation. It's not interest rates. It's not affordability. It all has to do with someone's job. Now, I want to break down 5 reasons why I believe the housing market has skipped negative equity, starting with excess savings. This is a great report from the Federal Reserve of San Francisco going into the sheer amount of money printing during the pandemic and how Americans still have an overabundance, not everyone, but many Americans have an overabundance still of excess savings. And when you put money in the hands of the consumers, they're going to spend it. U.S. households built up savings at an unprecedented rate following the strong fiscal response and lower consumer spending related to the pandemic. Despite recent rapid drawdowns of those funds, estimates suggest a substantial stock of excess savings remains in the aggregate economy. This goes on to say, we estimate that the accumulated excess savings in nominal terms totaled a whopping $2.1 trillion through August 2021. There was a tremendous amount of money and spending, but the thing is, guys, is that money in that excess savings is dwindling rapidly. After August 2021, aggregate personal savings dipped below the pre-pandemic trend, signaling an overall drawdown of pandemic-related excess savings. The drawdown to on-household savings was initially slow, averaging $34 billion per month from September to December of 2021. It then accelerated, averaging almost 3 times at $100 billion per month throughout 2022 before moderating slightly to $8.5 billion per month in the first quarter of this year, 2023. It goes on, approximately $500 billion of excess savings remains in the aggregate economy should the recent pace of drawdowns persist. It goes on to say there's about $500 billion left in excess savings, and it will likely to continue to support household spending at least into the quarter of 2023. So in other words, people are running out of money, and we also see that with consumer credit card debt essentially going up $250 billion in just 2 years. And think about that for a second here. Credit card debt is the absolute worst possible debt to be in. The second reason that I believe the housing market crash has skipped the last 4 months is because of the 2023 bank bailout or quantitative easing that happened in March of this year. You guys can see that from the Federal Reserve's total asset sheet. Y'all probably remember all of the bank runs that happened at the beginning of this year towards the end of February. Now, one of the things that the Federal Reserve did is they essentially met over the weekend and opened something called a discount window, which essentially injected, as you can see here, $400 billion back into the economy. And when this type of liquidity is injected back into the economy, obviously that's going to create additional inflation and additional buying demand, especially because this injection of liquidity right here was injected into lending institutions, and their jobs are to lend you and I money to buy things. So if our housing market, if our economy was so great, why the need to basically print $400 billion over the weekend? Y'all, it just doesn't add up how the Fed keeps fighting itself. But nevertheless, we had another period of quantitative easing at the beginning of this year. Obviously, that money trickled into the hands of the consumers. And as a result, not only did they have more liquidity to spend money, the third reason the housing market has paused its crash is because of the lack of inventory. Now, the name of the game for the housing market crash is inventory. We still are at a massive historic low, but I also wanted to remind everyone we are still above where we were at in 2022 and in 2021. So we have year over year inventory growth. That is a positive set of data, but I also want to remind us basically prior to the pandemic, we were sitting at an active listing count of 1 million units. Right now we're at 613, which basically means we need another 400,000 active units in order to put us back where we were at pre-pandemic. Now, the reality is, you guys, is I don't believe that the lack of inventory is preventing a housing market crash. I believe the lack of inventory is making the housing market crash much worse. In fact, I believe if we had 1 million active units right now, we would not have even paused. The trends would have been so strong, they would have overcome the normal spring seasonal home buying trends. Number 4, the ridiculously low delinquency rate for mortgages. We're almost at historical low records of foreclosures right now. As you guys can see here, the delinquency rate is only 3.31%. Pre-pandemic, you guys, we were sitting at more around 4%. So we do have historically low foreclosures right now. Now, one big reason that is because of the foreclosure bans, the massive equity run up, but also, y'all, loan modifications are proving incredibly effective. And personally, I don't necessarily have a problem with that because I don't want to see people kicked out of their house, especially the people that purchased in the last 2 years that basically fell for the narrative that home value is just going to go up. There's going to be a lot of innocent people that get swept up in this if they don't plan accordingly. Nevertheless, loan modification is preventing many people from going in foreclosure. And the astonishing thing is a majority of people are actually saving up to 20% on their mortgage payment. And some homeowners are actually getting a portion of their principal mortgage forgiven. So lenders want to keep people in their houses. Why would they want to keep people in their houses? Because lenders are not real estate agents. Lenders are in the business to collect interest. Now, I definitely believe that there is a potential for a foreclosure crisis, but I don't believe we'll start seeing that probably until Q3 of 2024, because obviously foreclosures take time. And really, we're going to see the foreclosures hit anyone that purchased after 2022, because people that purchased generally before 2022 have a super low interest rate in payment and are probably sitting with somewhere close to $100,000 or more inequity. Number 5, the ridiculously hot labor market. My goodness, you guys, the unemployment rate is only at 3.7%. That in itself is a historical low. And I know there's a lot of like junk jobs and seasonal jobs, and I know they mess with the data, but nevertheless, none of us can say that the labor market is not incredibly hot. So basically, if someone gets fired right now, there's like 2 jobs waiting for them. Probably that's going to pay them more money. Now, I also want to point out it's very astonishing. You guys can see here that when we started quantitative tightening back in March of 2022, the unemployment rate was 3.6%. Over a year after quantitative tightening, we're sitting at a 3.7, and in some months, the unemployment rate actually went down. What that means is the labor market is incredibly hot and incredibly resilient. And ask yourself this question: how could it not be when billions and billions of dollars in PPP forgivable loans were injected into businesses along with trillions of dollars of EIDL loans? Because the reality is government injected this money into businesses to prevent them from going out of business during COVID lockdowns. So all of the stimulus printing, you guys, has kept the labor market resilient. And if people are not worried about their jobs, they're still going to spend. But the reality is, and more than likely, when we really analyze this information, the unemployment rate should start skyrocketing upward. By the end of this year, people are anticipating the unemployment rate to be more like 4.5%. However, the intriguing thing about the home price correction so far, the actual unemployment rate has not corresponded with price crashes, which basically means the unemployment rate is not as important to watch as it is about the unemployment rate for the high paying, high migration jobs. When there's job loss with those high paying jobs, then America is going to start feeling the incoming recession, which we're not even in yet. We're not even in a technical recession yet. Now I'm going to go into the third segment of this video. You could say there's 6 reasons why I don't believe the housing market's crashing right now, or skipped the negative price decline. And I saved this one for the last because this is incredibly powerful. We're going to talk now about the fear of missing out. And we're actually going to review a research paper from the National Library of Medicine to see how powerful fear of missing out actually is. This is an incredibly powerful read. I'm not going to read everything for this video, but I will have it linked if you want to go back and see how strong fear of missing out actually is. But I'm going to skim through this with you guys. Fear of missing out is a unique term introduced in 2004 to describe a phenomenon observed on social networking sites. Fear of missing out includes 2 processes. Firstly, perception of missing out, followed up with a compulsive behavior to maintain these social connections. Now, this section goes into the fear of missing out and social functions. Basically, it's going into young adults are feeling lonelier and more disconnected than ever when they have fear of missing out. So basically, if you don't own a home, you're feeling lonely and disconnected from society. Heavy. The fear of missing out and interpersonal stress are associated with insomnia and subsequently poor mental health outcomes. So the fear of missing out ruins your sleep. It messes your mental health up as well. Fear of missing out as it pertains to performance and productivity. It has negative effects on academic performance. This is a good one. Fear of missing out and physical, not even mental, physical well-being. The young adults with high levels of fear of missing out are less likely to report their own lifestyle as healthy. The feelings of envy and social exclusion are also linked with poor eating habits. Additionally, fear of missing out promotes high SNS use, which leads to obesity in young adults. The amount of time spent on SNS is associated with vision issues and poor attention, which is linked with accidents while walking, crossing roads, driving, or doing daily activities. Fear of missing out may lead to poor posture and pain involved in your neck, back, hands, and fingers. This makes your sleeping worse and creates even more poor physical health. This is crazy, you guys. The treatment choice is based on the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy. The main treatment goal should be control rather than abstinence. I mean, come on, tell me fear of missing out isn't strong. Now, the thing is I believe that fear of missing out is going to go to the sellers, but right now is with the buyers. In conclusion, I think the low inventory is only making the problem worse, topped with that fear of missing out. Now, I do believe that we are in store for an additional round, probably several years of additional rounds of negative property growth. Now, I believe that's going to start this year around right now till the end of August. I believe that's when we're going to start seeing that whiplash downward trend. So I'll be watching the median sales prices to report back to you, but I definitely believe what's going on right now is kind of similar to a dead cat bounce and definitely similar to what happened back in 2006 through 2011. And let's not forget this, the yield curve inversion. The yield curves are still inverted. They have been for over a year. The depth of the inversion was the early 1980s. Just some food for thought. Now, other than that, guys, if you're out there investing in real estate, you know I wish you luck and I hope you win.